And it looks like the plan is certain, at least sections of the military were being organized, that when the quote unquote supposed insurrection of the 6th takes place, then the military can come in and have several things at the same time. The military, meaning some section of the military, certainly not the senior leadership, because they were clearly against it. But if they've been able to pull off the reversal in Georgia, if they've been able to get some Republican legislatures to flip the Electoral College, or at least repudiate some of the election results, if all of that had actually worked, then you have this stuff goes on the Hill. Then they would have a rationale for the armed forces to come in, declare martial law, Trump remains president, and they get to call some other kind of election, assuming they're going to have an election at all. It was a crazy scheme. It was nuts. I don't think it had any chance of succeeding. But the most important reason why it had no chance of succeeding, although there's probably many reasons, is that the elites, the real power in the United States, which means the financial and corporate elites, the billionaire class, the majority, not all, because Trump's got his billionaire backers and many, many multi-millionaire backers, but the majority did not want Trump to cause such a disruption to the transition to Biden, because it's not good for business.
Yeah.
What would happen? It would be chaos. The stock market would go nuts. Global finance would go nuts. China would go nuts. It would have been chaos if you all of a sudden don't have a peaceful transition to Biden. And of course, the elites didn't mind Biden coming in. Many of them even supported him because, one, Trump was going nuts while he was in office. And the best example of what I'm talking about, how the elites bailed on Trump, is that on January 6th, the doors of Congress are breached around 2:10 in the afternoon. At 3:04 in the afternoon, the American Association of Manufacturers issues a press release calling on Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove Trump. Now, this is one of the biggest lobbyist associations on behalf of corporate America. They have loved Trump for 4 years. They've been amongst his biggest backers because they got every tax cut they ever wanted. They got all the deregulation they wanted. But they had come to the conclusion that Trump had gone mad, and this would be bad for business. So it's time to dump Trump. Now, you don't make that decision in an hour.
Yeah.
The doors get breached at 2:10. You don't have a statement calling for Pence to remove Trump an hour later, and you're prepared for this. So clearly, the preponderance of the elites had decided they were going to get rid of Trump. Now, who organized that 10 secretary? This is where it gets even more interesting in some ways. And this piece hasn't been talked about enough. Who organizes the letter of the 10 secretaries of defense calling on the military not to intervene? Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney. Mm-hmm. So these aren't guys, certainly Dick Cheney and Liz, I don't think we've ever heard her disagree with her father in any way, including some of the people of these secretaries of defense, if not most of them. These are not people that are against authoritarian government. Certainly Dick Cheney was one of the biggest proponents, open proponents, of what people call the imperial presidency. Violating democratic norms is not Cheney's problem. He doesn't mind. I mean, what's the what is a bigger violator of democratic norms than an illegal invasion of a country that kills hundreds of thousands of people and doesn't have the authorization by Congress? I mean, Cheney doesn't mind this kind of stuff. But Cheney represents and sort of George Bush and that whole crew, they represent a real face of corporate America, of the military-industrial complex,
defense business,
and others, to a large extent fossil fuel, although Trump has a lot of backing from fossil fuel. So their differences with Trump and the Trumpist forces are not that they really give a damn about quote-unquote democratic institutions. And if you want to ask me later what I think of these democratic institutions, you can, because it's a complicated story, but not the way it's normally talked about. It's not that. It's that group that represents a really established corporate financial interest, yes, on the right, but the financial sector and such didn't have too much trouble with the Bush-Cheney administration. They don't want this kind of authoritarianism to be led by anyone other than them.